The first time Doug and I met, I live in California. I just a miserable few years, and I was walking down the street, Van Nuys Boulevard, and I was going to visit a friend, and I came upon this glass-plated window of this place, and I looked up, and it had a Sifu Kung Fu, and I didn't know what the hell that was. But there were people in there, people like James Liu, Albert Leong, and Takashi, Robin Kane, guys like the Louis brothers, Michael Tom. These are people, this is his first generation, and we're talking about. And they were throwing around weapons. Albert Leong was like, to me, I watched him, he had these silk pants on and these slippers, black slippers, and he was performing like he was the Tasmanian devil. So precise, so sharp, but yet so wild and uncontrollable. I saw James, he was like Baryshnikov, like a dancer, beautiful to watch. Same thing. And all these other guys were all doing all kinds of things. Todd Ducati, he was doing some kind of insect, To me, it looked like the prey mantis, which it was, and I was fascinated. And Doug saw me watching, came out, introduced himself, asked me to come in, sit down, watch. After a while, he said, "You interested?" And I said, yes. I was just fascinated. Never saw anything like that. Seen a lot of movies. I was a big movie buff when I was a kid. Was in Taekwondo, Shotokan in Brooklyn, New York for a little bit, before it closed down. But this stuff I had never seen before. And I was just fascinated. What Doug says is true, but how it happened is just unbelievable, because, and I'm talking about people other than me, people coming in at the same time with me. We would go, like Doug said, we would start with one class. Usually it was an evening class. And Doug would watch people teaching us, people like Albert and Michael Tom and Lloyd and Todd Takuchi. They would teach us. And Doug would watch, and Doug would be included, but I would see him while I was always a people watcher. He would watch. And all the people that he thought after a while, months, years, depending on the person, he would take them out and put them into an intermediate class. He would see special things in people. And part of that is like what Doug said, our drive, our willingness, our want, We would ask him, after a while, we'd feel a little comfortable and say, can we go to this class? Can we go to that class? And he would say, yeah. So we'd wind up going to sometimes 2-3 classes a day, 7 days a week. And on weekends, it was wonderful because there was no school. And after a while, he felt confident enough to give us all keys. And there were many of us. When I say many, comparatively, I would say there was probably a good dozen to 15 that started with me as a whole. People like a guy named Dino and Robert and Clifford, and I can name so many more. And Doug saw things in us and decided to put us in special classes, and that's how we continued. It was wonderful. And guys like me and guys like Clifford and Dino, we really didn't have any direction. I didn't do it for any reason other than somebody took notice in me, and it was athletic. And I was always a monkey, in Brooklyn, New York, the fastest runner, the best climber, things like that. So I took to it real fast and just enjoyed it. And that's how, his second wave came along. And we just got closer and closer and brought us in from the intermediate. He brought us into an advanced class where we worked out with the big boys. It took years. And when I say years, the way Doug taught us was, when I say a month, it was 3 years because it was intense and it was crippling sometimes. And the training was unbelievable. And we were just getting blasted, all animals, all insects. What Doug did was something very, very special, which helped me in my movie career later on, because I didn't know how to use this at the beginning until I started thinking. What Doug did, which no other school or style did that I knew of, after he taught you a form, he would break down every move. Because if you learn a form and you don't know what it's for, you don't know how to do the form. You don't know what it's for, how it's used. So he would break it down, every move. So I took that into the motion picture business. Because if he broke down one specific move at the beginning, very beginning of a of a form, or a kata, some people call it, you can use that one move 20 different ways, if you understand. So those breakdowns, I think I knew 46 forms. That's how intense the forms were. And we had to know them, and we had to understand them, which a lot of schools didn't do. So that training, including like he spoke about, the physical training was intense. If there was a 3-hour class, a good 2 hours would go on intense training, because like Doug said, physical is just as important as mental. And doing the physical is, like Doug said, if somebody does hit you, if you do get into a real fight, you could take it. You have a high tolerance of pain because you're used to taking the hit, because nobody's invincible. You're going to get hit. Okay, take it away. I said enough.
No, that was it. Well, what happened was, we had the regular classes, which, where students may, get to a black sash. It may take them 5 to 6 years to get to a certain level to allow to take the test. But Steve was in a special class of my intermediate and advanced people, which I intensify all the training. Everything that you probably learned in the Kung Fu school in 10 years, they learned in 3 years. Was highly trained, a special way that I wanted them to be, and they learned to teach. They also had to answer every question the person had, asking them. And every question they had to have 10 answers. That's the way I wanted to develop it. Because you can't have the same explanation for every person. Because every person has a different way of thinking, different way of learning. So you have to be on top of yourself to explain everything that you learned there and why they were doing it, for what purpose. So that was why it was intensified. So that's why a lot of times their education in Kung Fu was very high compared to the regular classes. Because I wanted them not to just be good students, but good instructors. So that's why everything they knew was in detail. They can go forward, backwards. They got punched on the ground. They're still sitting in that same horse position on the ground. I don't care. I had them turned upside down. They were still doing the form, whatever position I put them in. They had to learn how to do it. They had to figure out how the mind worked, how the body worked. So that was very different from other schools. I've been to other schools, and that's why a lot of those teachers come to our school and say, "You guys are crazy what you do." I had teachers come from China, Hong Kong. They saw our workout. I didn't watch them advance. Said, "We don't even do that in China. You guys are crazy." I said, "That's why I want to teach you. That's the way my students are always going to be on top of everybody else."